Hello and welcome to the program. This is Tigray Television English Program Service coming to you live from Mala, and we wish you a Merry Christmas wherever you live in the world. On Christmas message, Tigrayan religious leaders call for an immediate implementation of the signed peace agreement between the governments of Tigray and Ethiopia. The religious leaders also say elders, women, and children are still suffering from extreme weather, just like Lord Jesus suffered from the cold of December, the day he came to this world in Bethlehem. Gabriel Michael has more.
This year's Christmas has a unique meaning of hope for people in Tigray, as it is celebrated after 2 years heinous war and amid the signing of peace deal between the governments of Tigray and Ethiopia. On their holidays message, Tigrayan religious leaders call for an immediate implementation of the signed peace agreement, as many civilians are still suffering from the consequences of the war and the atrocities that are still being committed by Eritrean troops.
People in Tigray have paid dearly for the past 3 years, but this one seems a little better for some of us. It has been more than 2 months since a peace deal was signed between the government of Tigray and Ethiopia. But still, there are many who do not see any change in their lives, as their villages are still controlled by external forces. For many, the current situation is even worse than the past, as the killings and lootings are still continuing.
According to the religious leaders, IDPs in Tigray are still suffering from lack of basics, as they couldn't be able to return to their homes safely due to the presence of external forces in Tigray.
كما هو كله خمس فلطة بمليونات زقصرو تفناقلهم يوم زلوا.
Moreover, millions are still remaining displaced and forced to live under unbearable psychological trauma, as they are always longing to return back to their normal lives. Those IDPs are leading a horrible life wherever they are, as they are forced to live without getting enough food, medicine, and shelter. Elders, women, and children are still suffering from a harsh cold of December, the day he came to this world in Bethlehem.
ተጀሚሩ ዘሎ ሰላም ድማ ጽቡቅ እዩ ናይ ትግራይ መንግስትን ኢትዮጵያ መንግስትን ዝገበርዎ ንህዝብ ንልሓን ተባሂሉ.
It is good that peace agreement is reached between the governments of Tigray and Ethiopia to save the people. As religious institutions, we have been calling for this and we strongly support it. However, we are still expecting for the full implementation of the signed peace deal on the ground. Basic services such as banking system and transportation are not still resumed in many parts of Tigray yet. So we need the implementation of all that was signed in the agreement. External forces should leave the territories of Tigray so the IDPs could be able to return to their home safely. We are calling for the two governments mutually work on the immediate implementation of the signed peace deal.
The religious leaders also call all Ethiopians to support the signed peace deal in order to achieve a lasting peace in the country.
إذا نشتي ملكت رخبنا الله زلنا سلام فلسئة.
This little mark of peace we have achieved now is only settling. So we need to water it so that it can grow. We need to cultivate it so that it can flourish, and we need to look after it so it can bear fruit.
Reports so far show millions of children in Tigray have been exposed to a resurgence of vaccine-preventable diseases due to the total collapse of the health system and lack of access to vaccines. Informal urban settlement, overcrowding of IDP centers, and malnutrition are said to have worsened the condition. Our reporter spoke with an expert from Health Bureau who tells us that the discontinuation of routine immunization in Tigray is threatening the future of millions of children. Sarun Zagai reports.
Sheltered in an IDP camp in the town of Abiyaddi, Gannet Tatamka struggles to soothe her baby. Gannet was displaced from Tsagade in western Tigray. To save her life, Gannet traveled kilometers to reach central Tigray. Like many others in the camp that she's sheltered at, she suffered due to lack of food and proper medical attention. Gannet tells us that during her pregnancy, she didn't get a single medical checkup and that her newly born child is also unvaccinated. I gave birth here at the IDP camp. There was no medicine at the hospital, so why would I give birth there? When I went back to get my child vaccinated, they told me that they didn't have any and that they will notify me when they get vaccines. Aid agencies and the government should prioritize food and vaccinations, especially vaccines for infants. According to UNICEF, around 40% of unvaccinated and undervaccinated children live in countries that are either partially or entirely affected by conflict. Children in conflict-affected areas miss out on basic immunization because of the breakdown and sometimes the deliberate destruction of health services. Gebrahawrat Gebrachristos, Maternal and Children's Health Case Team Coordinator at Tigray Health Bureau, says that the discontinuation of vaccination during the past 2 years has now led to the resurgence of old or rare diseases.
When you look at the new generation, the occurrence of vaccine-preventable disease is rare because of the continuous immunization process followed. The occurrence of epidemics was also rare, but for the past 2 years, we've been witnessing the rise of diseases to epidemics that formerly were not even seen as epidemics. For example, measles was never seen in the form of epidemic, and meningitis as well. But now we're witnessing the rise of such diseases to epidemics.
Gebrahawrat says that the occurrence of a single case of such diseases is considered an epidemic.
The occurrence of a single case of polio in one child is considered an epidemic because this disease was eradicated. But keeping in mind the lack of communication in the assessment, we recorded some cases of polio in the past year. A research by Maqla University also revealed that vaccine-preventable diseases were among the causes of death of mothers, children under 5, and neonatals.
According to Gebrahawrat, the worst is yet to come as the effect of lack of vaccines will be projected after few years.
The effect of missing out on basic childhood vaccines is not seen immediately. It starts to affect the child 3 up to 5 years later. The current youth population is productive due to proper childhood vaccination follow-ups. And I'm telling you that the productivity of this upcoming generation is going to decrease due to lack of routine immunization.
Gebrahawrat says that since the signing of a peace deal, vaccines have been distributed and are being given only in the capital, Maqala. He says that the presence of Eritrean and Amhara forces in most parts of Tigray is disrupting the vaccination process, blocking others in Tigray not to get the hard-earned opportunity.
Vaccines are coming in, especially since December 25 of 2022. We've started vaccinating on December 29 in Maqala, and it is confined to Maqala. But there are millions of children still unvaccinated in different parts of Tigray, and to reach them, all of Tigray should be free, and we have to be able to move around. The peace deal needs to be implemented on the ground.
UN Secretary General spokesperson Stephen Dujarric said some areas in Tigray remain challenging to reach. In his briefing on Thursday, the spokesperson appreciated the humanitarian development after the signing of the cessation of hostilities, while stating the need to restore full banking service, public transportation, and the delivery of commercial supplies. Let's take a look.
Humanitarian colleagues are telling us that in the north, aid continues to be sent into the Tigray region. Between November of last year, following the cessation of hostilities, and the end of December, more than 3,000 trucks carrying food as well as health, shelter, water, and other supplies have been brought into the region through 4 road corridors. Some health and nutrition supplies were sent by air. Since mid-November, food has been distributed to more than 2.2 million people. However, some areas remain challenging to reach, including some border areas in the north and some areas off the main roads. Our humanitarian colleagues warn that malnutrition rates remain alarming. 1/3 of children screened in late December were acutely malnourished. 4% of them were severely malnourished. There continues to be gradual improvement in the resumption of basic services in Tigray for the population. Ethiopian Airlines has now resumed passenger flights to Mekelle and Shire. The first bank resumed some operations in Mekelle January 2nd, with some having reopened in other parts of Tigray in December, and that is good news. The telecommunications and electricity supply have also been restored. However, full banking services, public transportation, and the delivery of commercial supplies have not yet resumed. That is, of course, important for the humanitarian recovery. Humanitarian needs also remain extremely high in parts of Afar and Amhara regions that have been impacted by the conflict. The distribution of food and other assistance continues, although gaps remain, including in areas where people are returning to their homes. Meanwhile, in eastern and southern parts of Ethiopia, communities continue to suffer the devastating drought, which has been impacted the Horn of Africa as a whole. Nearly 12 million people are estimated to be food insecure. More than 8 million people are in need of water and sanitation and hygiene assistance. An active cholera outbreak also continues in parts of the Oromia and Somali regions of Ethiopia. The humanitarian response is being scaled up in the drought-impacted areas, but we need more resources.
A woman who has been suffering from hepatitis with her other family members for years says her misery has continued to worsen now as she can't get her medication. Expert in Zana Health Center, Gabroha Dasafa, also adds that the hospital has lost more than 300 patients in vain only of hepatitis so far. Nahom Hadgu reports.
This woman who lives in Zana is one of the many suffering from hepatitis. She says she has been suffering for years along with her other family members.
It has been 19 years since I started suffering. I feel ache in my liver and my womb is displaced from its original place. I also feel pain in my wrist. My suffering blasted as I could not get any medicine. My brother is also in dire condition as he's suffering from disease. Now we are in a very dire condition. As they can't help me stop bleeding, I can't stay long wearing one clothes. I'm suffering too much.
Expert in Zana Health Center, Gabriel Asafa, says hundreds have lost their lives due to hepatitis, and others are still suffering from the weed-borne infection of liver as there is still depletion of medical supplies in the health center.
This woman is suffering from the liver infection called HED. This disease was first recognized in 2005 in a place called Alaqal from the weed locally named Hagai Fatah. What makes the situation more difficult is we're receiving 5 or 6 patients from a single house. So far, we've lost more than 300 people.
The expert also recalled that it was able to control the disease using different technical mechanisms in the times before the outbreak of the war. However, now, as the system has collapsed, the disease has knocked every door of the residents.
When there was peace, there was sufficient amount of aid provided for our patients for free. We used it to provide them many treatments using different mechanisms. However, now our patients are in dire condition in general. They are desperately waiting days to come, as they are left with no other chance.
The patients and health experts urged the withdrawal of Eritrean troops and Amhara forces from Tigray according to the peace accord signed to ensure the sustainable benefit from it and improve the health center in the region.
We are happy about the peace accord. We have hopes to be helped and get out of this miserable condition.
The Eritrean troops and Amhara forces should withdraw from Tigray immediately, and we expect the full implementation of the peace deal in the ground.
World's most wanted human trafficker with links to the Eritrean regime has been arrested by Interpol in Sudan. In her brief stay with Tigray Television's Magala Forsyth professor in international relations, innovation and care at Tilburg University, Mirjam van Ryssen said the human trafficker is linked to the Eritrea's government led by Isaias Afwerki. For a report by Michele Manasseh, Abel Zagabu.
World's most wanted human trafficker with links to the Eritrean regime has been arrested in Sudan. An Eritrean human trafficker who headed a notorious Libya-based human trafficking ring responsible for the murder, torture, and extortion of thousands of African migrants has been arrested in Sudan. Picked up on New Year's Day in a multinational police operation overseen by the UAE, Kidane Zacharias Haftamariam had been on the run since his February 2021 escape from a courthouse in Ethiopia, where he spent a year behind bars. Professor in International Relations, Innovation and Care at Tilburg University and University of Leiden, Miriam van Ryssen told Magala Forsyth that the human trafficker is linked to the Isaias regime in Asmara.
Key trafficker operating at the top of the trafficking network in Ethiopia, Tigray, Libya, who is an Eritrean and connected to the Eritrean regime, he has been arrested, and there was a manhunt from Dutch and European and international investigators on him, and the Dutch police had a price on his head, so they were hunting him down, and they have now arrested him in Khartoum, and they have brought him to the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, who was overseeing this investigation from the Middle East part of Interpol. And they are now saying that he will first be tried in the Emirates for money laundering. There's a lot of money involved. It goes probably hand in hand with all of the resources from the Red Sea Trading Corporation that keeps Isaias going in the conflicts, including in Tigray.
Described by Dutch authorities as being among the cruelest of people smugglers, Kidana's criminal network preyed upon migrants desperate to flee conflict, poverty, and oppressions for European shores by luring them from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, and Somalia to his base in the town of Ban Walid, 180 kilometers southeast of Libya's capital, Tripoli. Survivors have shared chilling testimony of starvation, murder, and torture at the warehouse, which held hundreds of hostages at a time. Families of hostages would be coerced into selling their homes and other possessions to cover ransom payments in the tens of thousands of dollars to save their loved ones. Eyewitnesses have accused Kidana of organizing football matches between hostages and awarding winning teams with women hostages to rape and shooting players who missed goal-scoring opportunities.
That's it for this edition. Thank you very much for watching.